Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Shona Vertue. This is a treat. All my guests are treats, but this one's, to me, quite special. You are a strength coach, a yoga teacher, very worldwide recognized fitness brand. You've been very successful. You branded around the Vertue method, which just your surname is magic for fitness branding. Some people I didn't get as lucky. And part of your background is a Bachelor of Psychology. So a lot of your media weaves psychological principles in. So it's a real pleasure and honor to have you.
Thank you. It's very much an honor to be on this podcast and to chat with you, actually, because, as we chatted offline, the lineup you've had is amazing. And I as soon as I saw that you had Alyssa on there, you had Liz on there, I was like, my goodness, I need to binge listen. So I had a good old binge of your podcast. It's awesome.
Yep. Recently, Dr. Alyssa Olenek, she's become a great friend. I think she's one of the brightest young minds, educators in our space. Just been a treat to get her back a couple of times. And we got to hang out at a conference last year. And I'm just loving to see what she's doing in the industry. But let's talk about you. And, well, you have a famous, client in your history. And it's not going to be about him, but you somehow got one of the most successful and prominent athletes in the world, Mr. David Beckham, to embrace yoga, amongst other things. So if you can get a guy like David, I guess, how would everybody benefit from incorporating more yoga in their lives?
Oh, that's a big question. So look, to be honest, I think what made David change his mind about yoga was really the immediate effects. And I actually remember the first session we had. I was walking home. I remember I probably have it on some old phone somewhere, a text message from him just saying, wow, my back feels amazing, because he'd been complaining about back pain. Now, I want to really put a big asterisk in here and say that doesn't necessarily mean that the takeaway is yoga will fix your back pain. And I'm sure we can get into pain perception, but I think the immediate effect of reducing his pain perception after something that had been quite, chronic for a while was enough to make him to pique his curiosity on that front. So that was sort of what continued. And I think when you ask me about, generally speaking, the benefits of yoga, there are a lot of it depends, which I'm sure you could probably play a drinking game on your podcast. And with all of your guests, I imagine that if you drank every time someone said it depends, because everything is context dependent, I imagine people getting very drunk.
I like to use the example of Brad Schoenfeld. And if you listen to hypertrophy social media, you hear, extremes and absolutes. And this one study has proven this or debunked this. And Brad, who, like most people's understanding, would be one of the world's true leaders in exercise, physiology, muscle hypertrophy research. And oh my God, he is very measured, no absolutes whatsoever, and very, very clear in how much he dislikes the use of absolutes in hypertrophy research. But anyway, I interrupted you.
And conversation, right? Conversation, because it's all over. It's really loud in the fitness space. And so, yes, so it depends. And it depends on not just, the person, but it actually also depends on the yoga. And we could, get into a bigger conversation about, how do you really define yoga? I'm going to say that yoga through a Western lens, yoga as a purely physical practice, I would say, no, it probably doesn't benefit everyone, at least, again, depending on not just the person, but then also their intention. What are they using it for? So it's a big one. There's a lot to talk about here, actually. It's very exciting.
The floor is yours. Please take it where you like.
Well, I think coming back to your original question about David, really it was about slowing down and taking a different approach that improved interoception at the same time. So like your internal sensation awareness, while at the same time, I'm always cautious of saying like calms the nervous system. And for those of you that are not watching, but you're listening, I'm kind of putting it in inverted commas here because the nervous system has always been kind of, I guess, presented really simply. And I understand that we need heuristics and we also need like just sort of dichotomous ways to think about things. But the nervous system isn't so much that you've got like parasympathetic switch on one side and then sympathetic switch to the other side. So we're not kind of like, going from like intense to, like calm and chill. That can happen. But what's really happening is it's more like two managers kind of coexisting, and they're actually both working at the same time. But one is obviously like louder at one point than the other. And I think what the research points to, and what I could just say anecdotally as well, is that yoga makes that system much more flexible. So basically it means that you become much better over time, again, depending on the yoga, at relaxing, true relaxation, not just lying on a beach, but actually being able to calm down when you lie on that beach, and true recovery and true rest, as well as basically fire up when you need to fire up.
This might be, again, a violation of what you just tried to clarify, but does it generally make people better at upregulating the parasympathetic nervous system? So again, it's calming that fight or flight on an everyday basis, and maybe even not necessarily so acutely, but just on a daily basis. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And then again, oh my goodness, it depends on the yoga. And that the reason I say this is because, forgive me for, I don't know how much you know about the different styles of yoga that kind of are across the market.
I would love education here. And like for everybody listening, because again, I want to obviously, you're a fantastic role model for yoga, right? And its practice. But I got a lot of people probably lump it under that one bucket.
Yeah. Well, they do. And I guess what I want to say is if we take a step back and we go, really, what is yoga? Yoga in the way it's been sort of digested through a Western lens is that it's a physical practice. You turn up, you do these postures, these asanas is the Sanskrit word for it. And you kind of stretch and maybe you do some isometric holds here and there. Maybe you'll also insert a little bit of breath work, breath synchronized movement there. But for most of how people, including the sort of mobility, community, let's say, and even the strength and conditioning community, have always observed it as a physical practice. And so they're like, oh, this is a really inferior physical practice. Like you're doing, yeah, cool. It might like relax you a little bit. You're doing a little bit of deep breathing. Yeah, cool. That might support your nervous system a bit. And you're stretching a bit. But you know what? Gymnastics-based techniques are better. Or, these mobility techniques are better. Or you should be doing weighted flexibility work. And the problem is that we're yes, I don't disagree with that if we're looking at it purely through the Western lens. When we actually don't ignore 80% of what yoga actually is, which is a much larger philosophical approach or system, let's say, then actually everyone would benefit from yoga. But it's not easy to apply. It's not as simple as the postures. You're talking about something that is very difficult to do, like not over-identifying with the body. Something in the fitness industry that we really struggle with, right? And it contributes to a lot of psychological issues when we over-identify with our thoughts, when we over-identify with our body, when we over-identify with our relationships. Yoga as a philosophy, as a system, is something that asks us on both a mental, physical, and even, if you will, spiritual level to clean out those areas. And through that cleanliness, we hope to achieve stillness. And it's in that stillness that we can access like our quote unquote true self or a higher self or whatever language you want to use to describe it. So yeah, that's not really often the yoga that the fitness industry are talking about, or that the strength and conditioning people community or the mobility community are talking about. So when you look at yoga from that perspective, then yeah, I would say like as a purely physical practice, it's not going to be superior for making you flexible. It's not going to be superior for making you strong, but it's doing something else, something that is very difficult to test in the research. We're getting closer, but it's difficult. And it's also something that has so much variance depending on the person doing it that once again becomes difficult to test in research to get a load of empirical, that high quality empirical data on it. But it also means that some people that go into yoga, as they're not sort of really taking it on, their perception is going to change of what yoga is. And then that dictates the outcomes. And so I think I probably made everyone more confused about whether yoga would help them or nothing. But hopefully there's like a slightly more opening of the mind around the idea of what yoga actually is.
I think one of the big takeaways is sort of a bit of a oh moment for me is to not just think about it through the lens of comparing it to other fitness modalities.
Physical. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And like, look, it's still good. We know it's still good for people that do that, that are doing those sorts of yogas. But yes, sorry, I think my original point that I was going to try to make was also about the different styles. So you've got vinyasa, you've got, which is like moving. It's very, some would even argue that it's like almost cardiovascular because you're going from, I think the closest way to compare it is kind of like a controlled, non-explosive burpee because you're kind of going from a standing position, reaching your arms up, folding down, hands to the floor, moving through a similar sort of push-up position, going back to a downward facing dog. So your head's going upside down, you're jumping your feet to the top. So this is what's known as a sort of like vinyasa movement. It's typically a series of postures put together, and we use the breath to kind of move us through from A to B to C to D, right? That is quite physically taxing on the body. And so it can feel really challenging. It can feel like you're getting a kind of workout, and you are. There's Hatha yoga, which is much more traditional. It's much more, usually you have much more time to really bring in a stillness to each of the postures, and you are really connecting to the breath, to sensation as you do it. So it's a lot more still. There's Iyengar, another one that focuses on alignment principles. There's yin yoga, which is deeply relaxational. It's about actually connecting with, and this is more taking on Chinese medicine, if you will, the yin and yang principles. Yin being the sort of stillness, the softness, the relaxation aspect of life that exists within our universe. And it's very much about coming into a pose, having absolutely no physical contraction and working to relax. So it's deeply relaxing for a lot of people. Can also be deeply confronting depending on your personality, depending on things that are going on for you in your life. And so when that stuff comes up to the surface, it can make it really, really hard to process. So this is what I mean. There's so much variance. And that's why it makes it hard in the research to really get a clear understanding, because everyone's teaching slightly differently. Different cohorts of people will respond differently based on so many other variables of their personality and of their psychology as well.
And you haven't mentioned hot yoga at all.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, don't even get me started. I mean, hot yoga, the thing that I find really funny about hot yoga is that I sort of like, I think it's really just about replicating India, of what it's like to be in India. Other than, and I used to teach hot yoga and I loved it. I felt, oh my gosh, I just felt so invigorated. But I probably just felt kind of dizzy and dehydrated. Not that I feel good when I'm dehydrated, but there's a real question around, and I think this maybe people don't feel this way as much anymore, but I think for a long time in the fitness space as well, that sweat was indicative of efficacy. You know what I mean? Or even that sweat was indicative of intensity. And it's not always the case. Like, yes, intense on your kidneys. Definitely.
Good point. Are there any problems with yoga, in particular the marketing or maybe the practice in the way that it's showing up for some people or the way that people are experiencing it?
Yeah, I mean, other than the stripping of the philosophy, which I think is, does impact the efficacy of yoga. Like, it really takes away the benefit, but many people aren't going to embrace those elements. Could be for a number of reasons, right? Like if you're religious and you have a religion that you practice already, but you're like, but I like the feeling, I like what yoga does for me from a physical perspective, even the breathing practices, they feel really good mentally. Keep going. Like that's fine. That's fine for you to get those benefits. I think that one of the biggest problems I see is when people, really, really easy example is like people going to a vinyasa yoga practice or a hot yoga practice in the hopes to alleviate their anxiety because they've heard that yoga is relaxing. The problem with that is that it may have, some of the breath practice may have an effect on you and may help, but ultimately you have to question whether it's having a long-term beneficial impact on your anxiety when the like kind of intensity of the movement, let's say you're not taking on any of the philosophy, you're just doing a little bit of breath, you skip the shavasana, which is the relaxation part at the end, and you just kind of like get in, do your thing, get out. I mean, it's really, you've just done like a sort of strange modern contemporary dance workout and then you've left. It's not really doing what you think it's doing in terms of relaxation.
I know I've done one class in my life. I got brought along. I'm not at all skilled with it. And I'm looking around. Thankfully, I was at the back of the room. There's only one other guy in there. And I wouldn't describe the challenge of it, because it wasn't a beginner class, as it turns out, or the fact that I'm worried about doing this right, as relaxing was not the word I would choose.
Yep. And I think that has a lot to do look, and I'm being very general here, but I do think that has a lot to do with men tending to ignore their flexibility work and not being as flexible as women. And so the actual movements, you're in these lunges, like the lunge that you do on the gym floor is very different to the lunge that you do in yoga. And you're really moving to end ranges here. And then sometimes being asked to hold for 5 breaths, which for a lot of people is actually quite long because it's sometimes like they're encouraging you to do maybe a 3-second inhale, 6-second exhale. You're doing that for, sometimes upwards of 5 breaths. That's a long time to be holding that isometric position. Lots of people don't do any isometric work anyway. So it's confronting. It's not relaxing. However, what I would push, I guess, on people that feel that way when they're confronted with some of the positions you move into in yoga is that sometimes we can't actually understand the skill that's required to relax until we're met with stress. So what I often say in my yoga classes is like, how you react to stress on the mat is often a reflection of how you react to stress in life. And so as you practice more and more, you realize like, oh gosh, I do get tense in the shoulders, or I do clench my jaw, or my breathing rate does increase. And so ideally, the yoga room becomes this place where you can practice a small amount of stress to change your stress response or the way that you respond to that particular type of stress. Let's say it's the confrontation of being in like a very long lunge at end ranges. And rather than reacting with over-identifying with negative thoughts, like, oh my gosh, I'm not flexible. I've got to get out of this pose. Oh my gosh, she's keeping me in this for so long. Instead, over time, you learn to respond with a deep breath in and an even slower breath out. What does that do for your stress response when you're met with divorce in real life or, someone saying something triggering to you in a meeting? And this is often the magic of yoga. That this is really often what is so powerful is that no other, let's say, movement modality tends to teach it as well as yoga does. I think in my experience, and I've done a whole bunch of different things, including gymnastics. And I know that I can be in gymnastics and no one's guiding you through the sort of spiritual response or the breath-based response or the psychological response you should have to being met with the stress of a certain stretch or a certain position. And so ideally, that has transference in real life. And it's not just ideally, empirically, we're seeing more and more that is the case. Many more higher quality studies over time are showing and demonstrating the brain changes that are happening through yoga.
I'll interrupt this episode for a quick but important side quest. While I don't think everybody needs to track nutrition all the time, tracking is one of the most powerful tools to make sure you're not eating too much or too little. And Macros First is my go-to app for me and my clients. Macros First has a free barcode scanner, and a premium version comes with a bunch of cool stuff to make managing your nutrition easier. Like, one, AI search. AI is everywhere now, where you can speak or type the foods you wish to save and log everything without having to search for each individual ingredient. Two, import recipes from a website. Save time creating recipes manually by importing all ingredients and instructions from your favorite recipe websites. No more searching for each ingredient one by one, just paste in the website. And three, this one's a big one for nutrition coaches. Follow unlimited friends so you can follow all your clients. And there's a lot more cool features. You can try the premium version of Macros First free for 14 days. Just download Macros First from the App Store. And during setup, you'll be asked, how did you hear about us? Type in the code Andrew. Is there any relationship here with simply getting someone off their goddamn phone for an hour? Because you go lift weights in the gym, guess what? We're on our phones, and I defend the right to, but I mean, with these classes and what's going on with them, and you talk about stress and we're talking stimulus and response. I mean, I think now a lot of people are hardwired to have the phone in front of them and to distract them with stimulus in stressful moments, right? Of course, we get into hijacking the ancestral lizard brain, but to me, for someone who's wired that way, throwing them into a class where you actually have to focus on it, you haven't used the word meditation, and yet I've always related yoga to being meditative, maybe not technically, but in principle or in practice.
Absolutely.
Thoughts, anything I've just said there, do you think there's something there?
No, there's absolutely, there's lots there. I think that's really powerful. I think the difference is then how do you compare it with the benefits of like Pilates, for example? What's the difference? Because in Pilates class, you're off your phone as well. So I do think that there are benefits. I think the difference is in it really does come back probably to the teacher, to the philosophy, to the insertion of philosophy into the practice itself, whereby you are hopefully somewhat reminded of some of these yogic principles that ask you not just to get off your phone, because yes, that is a huge benefit, but then to recognize what's coming up for you and meet that with the philosophy, which ideally starts to kind of clean it out in a way. I think when it comes to meditation, there's an ancient, it's not the most ancient, but it's ancient enough text called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And in it basically says that the yogic postures are there simply to prepare your body for meditation, because truly meditation is very, very, very difficult. And I don't like to, I get nervous about saying that because I don't want everyone's perception to always be, oh, it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so hard. Obviously perception, I don't want to reduce anyone's self-efficacy around meditation. It starts, but difficult things don't mean that we shouldn't try them. When something is difficult, we don't, it's like how I feel about people saying, like, having children seems so hard, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, well, hard doesn't necessarily equal bad. Difficult doesn't always mean bad, right? It's often greatness comes out of difficulty. So I would definitely say that meditation is that as well. And so, yes, yoga postures are ideally preparing you, such as well as yogic breath work is preparing you for meditation.
And in no way, shape, or form would I even attempt to imply, nor was I, that just getting someone off, the benefit would be just getting someone off their phone.
No, I know. I know.
And we know that's good for people, but I'm actually thinking that if you take someone away from this device that's distracting them from, I think, a lot of the shit that may be very stressful, and it's its own kind of stress, I'm wondering if it's actually, for someone brand new, it might be a compounding stressor, the experience of not having this little outlet while you are in your thoughts, in your breath, for an hour, all this sort of stuff. So,
yeah, and I think it's worthwhile acknowledging that as well. No, sorry. It's just you've made a really good point that I hadn't really considered the phone piece that much. But yeah, you make a really good point, because I think it's one of the things that deters people is just how confronting it can be. And so we often label as like, oh, no, that was stupid. I don't like it. And you can find all these reasons. And I do find that people who gravitate towards weight training and strength conditioning, they do find it very confronting. because in the gym, when you're mid-set, there's no noise, or there's minimal noise. When you come off and you have to go through your rest period, that's when you pull out the phone, as you already mentioned, right? And so it's when you go into a class where you don't feel the kind of like, I always think about Arnie. I'm calming in the gym. That's not the same thing. But when he's talking about, just the intensity of the set and how fun it is. Like, I love it too. And then the pump you get after. So even, when you're in the rest period, you're kind of feeling high, and then you're still looking and scrolling through Instagram. Like, none of that happens really in the yoga practice. That's why people like hot yoga, because hot yoga sort of can replicate the kind of high that you might start to get when you're doing lifting, when you're doing, a set of 8 to 10 or 12 cardio, that kind of thing. So I think that's the, I can understand why you might gravitate towards that. And then the problem is you're not going to get the long-term benefits from that kind of approach, and you're missing out on lots of the magic of yoga. And so then, I think you're missing out when you don't actually go head first into the thing that you're trying to avoid, which is more stillness, which is less stimulation.
I've always suspected, and you alluded to this earlier about men, I've always suspected there's a self-selection bias in that women, on average, are naturally more mobile, more flexible, and therefore it makes sense they would gravitate to something that they're naturally already good at, and that men would possibly be deterred. And there's also the cultural side of stuff where women are probably, on average, they must be 80+% of yoga consumers societally, right? So there's stigma for some men too. But again, if you get a guy like, that's the whole point of the intro to the episode, is if David Beckham can do it, he's a pretty cool guy. I guess any guy theoretically could, right?
Yeah, I think I was actually talking to my partner about this. I said to him, give me like your most male response, like just channel the patriarchy, please. And he basically was like, listen, he's like, I've got finite time to get jacked and to get rich. And so I don't know like where yoga fits in that. And he said, but he then continued, he was like, it wasn't until so I introduced him to a text called the Tao Te Ching. This is a Chinese text, but I'm sure, have you heard of it? Is it on your shelf? Can't see.
No, I can't claim that, but I've heard of it. I've heard of it. So,
okay. Very, very good. I mean, written by Lao Tzu, who's like this mysterious Chinese figure who is, some people say that he's like still alive, that he's not alive, that he's, died when he was like 400 years old. I don't know. There's all kinds of amazing, mysterious things about it. But this text is quite brilliant. And I do recommend a lot of men to read it specifically, but also women too. It's not really a gendered text. But he said that when he started reading the Tao, he recognized the value in the two extremes more, because he was like, you need to, in order to reach the extremity of strength, or let's say the extremity of jackedness, you also need to reach extremities of softness, of like being able to relax, right? Like we can't strengthen a contracted muscle. And so you need to be able to relax it. Now, I'm not saying that that's the yoga practice, or like that means that everyone needs to do yoga, but he recognized that the value in softness, in the yin, in the kind of like contractive aspects of life, in introspection, all of that, which is really very much valued and very much encouraged in the yoga practice. And so that's when he was like, oh, and so he started stretching more. He started practicing more yoga himself, because he realized that actually it is quote unquote masculine, and it will actually support the other endeavors that you have. If it is getting jacked and getting rich, actually you can't just do that without doing the other stuff too. And if you, even from a, like, let's say cognitive perspective, we can't just go. We need to be able to rest. And so if you're the type of person where, you close your eyes at night to go to sleep, and you know that you are exhausted from an intense day at work, you're an investment banker and you're trying to sleep, and suddenly like your brain is so wired, or maybe you have to use a lot of help to get you to go to sleep, then medical help to get you to go to sleep, then probably practicing something like yoga is going to be really beneficial.
Ooh, big takeaway there. Yeah.
Are you an investment banker with having trouble sleeping?
I'm good with sleep. My educational background is actually in finance as a Bachelor of Commerce degree, yes.
Okay.
And I do my own investing, although I don't mess around nearly at that scale. And it's not been particularly stressful of late, so we're good. But you mentioned Pilates. And so I feel
Yes.
like if 5 to 10 years ago, hot yoga was the buzzworthy thing in the space, it does feel like that Pilates is the buzzworthy thing in a lot of women's fitness now. And are there key misconceptions that fitness consumers have, or perhaps even that some of the messaging coming out of Pilates about it? And I want to be charitable, and I want to know what you think Pilates is great for, and perhaps maybe something that it can't do in isolation.
Yeah, I recently actually did a podcast episode on this specifically, which has gone very well. I'm it's a really popular topic, and it's causing a lot of confusion actually, which upsets me because I don't think it's a case of either or. Like, I don't think that, and the confusion that I'm talking about is people feeling like they don't know whether to do weight training or whether to do Pilates. And I think when it comes to Pilates, probably one of the strongest misconceptions that there is that the burn is where the efficacy is. Like, not so much that, but that the burn means that you're yielding the best response, or it's like the stimulus for the long, lean, toned body. And it's just not actually physiologically correct, but it feels good, right? Like, it feels like you're getting something out of it. And so I think when I have done Pilates in the past, I'm actually a qualified Pilates teacher as well. Like, many, many years ago, I became a Pilates teacher alongside yoga because I thought, well, a lot of it really helped my back when I did start. I had a lot of hypermobility. I'd quit gymnastics. I had a whole lot of hypermobility. Yoga was actually making it worse. So at the same time, I was doing a bit of Pilates and a bit of weight training. I think weight training had the biggest effect on me, but Pilates, I remember going into one session in so much pain and I came out with no pain. And it had a lot to do with the fact that we did a lot of work around the pelvis and pelvic stability and it, like, glute work and hamstring work. And this was something that I hadn't really paid much attention to because I was always obsessed with getting them to be as flexible as possible, but not strong and flexible. And so I think the biggest misconception, though, when I go now is that lots of Pilates instructors will be like, yeah, okay, in order for my students to feel like they got something out of this class, I'm going to make sure that I give them a really good burn. And so you'll kind of be in the class burning in your glute medius, or sometimes even in like your piriformis, like these deep stabilizers. Piriformis, not so much medius, but you're kind of like, oh, okay, I can feel that. But is it really getting you what you want? Or is it giving you what you think it's giving you? And more often than not, it isn't. So I think that's my biggest pet hate with how Pilates is sold. What I do think Pilates is great for is improving body awareness, is improving coordination, training through different planes of motion that we often neglect in weight training, right? And doing a lot of work that asks you to really pay attention. Whereas if you go to a CrossFit class or you go to a weight training class, and often it's like, just get the set, get the reps, add the weight to the bar. The perspective in Pilates is earn the right to add weight to your reformer or to your position. And sometimes a little too far to one side, but for the most part, it's really about trying to prioritize execution, form, understanding, interoception, what's happening, where is my body in space. That, to me, only benefits you when you go and take that same way of thinking into your weight training. The only caveat that I will say is that in weight training, sometimes you do just need a tiny little bit of extra grit and not to be so hypervigilant with form. And I only say that to a certain few. There's lots of men out there that I would be like, no, you do more of the other stuff. And then there's lots of women where I'd be like, let's you're currently working at like an RPE of 4. We can bring that weight up, and I promise your form is still going to be nice and clean, and you're not going to leave here looking, huge in your traps.
I definitely think that the industry tends to, say the strength training side, the hypertrophy side, think about the value of movement through those lenses exclusively. And if they don't do those things well, they're not very good. And I think you've done a wonderful job of showcasing there's so much more to be said. It's not the primary purpose. Now, here's how I've often thought about yoga, Pilates, and even calisthenics as well. There's a lot of stuff within it. It also depends on someone's skill level, their strength. There's a lot of things within that will actually be challenging, and you can take it to near failure. I mean, calisthenics and chin-ups and push-ups is a really good example. There's also a lot of bodyweight stuff that most people can't approach failure, so therefore you're not going to get a great strength or hypertrophic stimulus at that point. But I think there's certain poses in yoga that are actually so challenging that you're going to get to near failure, and they're going to be strengthening. And as you said earlier, they're going to be wonderful for developing mobility to near end, like spending time in your end ranges. And I suspect in Pilates for a lot of people, especially early, some of that stuff is actually going to approach failure. So you're actually going to get strengthening and hypertrophic stimuli. I think where the limitations are is with yoga and Pilates for the kind of, and again, it's not fair to look at them as through the lens of, well, they're supposed to be for this, but especially for women now, and we're talking getting into perimenopause, postmenopause, which has come up on the show with Alyssa Olenek and Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. I've given a lot of treatments to that if people want them. But for the needs, especially for women, for strength and bone health, it's almost too simple to say it, but is Pilates and yoga, are they enough for that woman long term?
No, they're not enough. And actually, I think I did. Yes. Oh, I'll try and send it to you. In the podcast episode I did on this, I talk about the fact that there is a paper, and forgive me because I did do it quite a while ago. So I will give it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But basically, this one study was looking at the fact that while yoga and Pilates did not appear to actually improve BMD, bone mineral density, it actually prevented decline in a cohort of women where we normally would see it go down. And so if they didn't do anything, basically. And so yoga and Pilates can probably maintain you. So it's like, if that's the only thing that you feel safe, that you feel that you can commit to, then yes, like keep going. Don't let people in the strength conditioning community make you think that it's a total waste of time. You may as well give up everything. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. So please keep going. But just know that if bang for your buck, and everyone is time poor these days, just even if you were just to train one session. So if you're doing 3 Pilates sessions a week, just like, could you swap that out and just start to lean towards some weight training as well, or maybe you do 4 or 5 Pilates classes a week. Like, yes, you definitely have time and capacity to switch out one of those and start learning how to lift.
Well, to your point, I mean, for sure, traditional resistance training is going to be able to build more muscle, and that extra muscle that can be built at any age in a very meaningful way is going to be a support that hedges against bone strength. But as I understand it, I mean, even resistance training doesn't do magical things for building new bone. Most bone is built at a very young age. And even resistance training is, as you described it, mostly about maintaining what you have with a little bit of ability to build. So in that comparison, I'm not convinced from what you just told me that Pilates or yoga would actually be inferior to resistance training on bone. Now, that might not be an accurate statement, but I suspect they're probably closer than most people will give them credit for.
Yeah. And I think the difference is that there's if we're just purely looking at bone mineral density, yeah, probably you're right. I don't know. I don't know to date any studies that have like really, scrupulously compared the two. But what I would argue is that we know, because we both strength train, there's like a multitude of other benefits that Pilates and yoga won't meet. Like mechanical tension being one of them. Like it's just not possible. Like we're not getting that kind of stimulus through yoga and Pilates. Calisthenics might be slightly different because the leverage is different. And so you're working in a slightly different way. But I think It's the same. It's like, likewise, there are a multitude of benefits from Pilates that you're not getting in strength training that I think that, people would benefit from. Moving through end ranges is probably one of them for sure. Like, I just think that it's very difficult. There's a few people that I see that are definitely moving through very, very big ranges. I don't know if you follow Alec Blennis. Is it Alec Blennis?
I'm familiar with him.
Yes. You got to get him on for sure. But he, I love his, and I love his insane range. I mean, he'll be like in the splits with his back leg, like on a cable, kind of like doing a kind of leg extension while in a splits position. It's pretty gnarly. And so he is definitely, I guess, on the outer spectrum of end range, building end range strength. He probably doesn't need to go to a Pilates class. But yes, anyway, the point is that I think we all benefit from like being a little bit more quote unquote holistic in our approach.
And I mean, I think one of the first things I said when I introduced you is you're a strength coach. So we wouldn't want anybody to think that your entire practice is yoga and Pilates. You resistance training with, all your clients. So pointing that out, do you think that most people are just too narrow in their fitness focus? They grab onto one thing, it becomes their identity, and that's all they do, and they would benefit again. And this is the same thing that talking to Alyssa Olenek, it's like getting people to do cardio who just only lift weights.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think because there's a number of reasons. There's a number of psychological reasons too. I think we need to lean and chase, chase things that make us a little bit more uncomfortable. And we're naturally going to gravitate to things. We already sort of touched on it. Women are probably gravitating towards yoga and Pilates because they're probably, not just because it feels like maybe a safer environment, but also because generally speaking, women will be better at it than men. And so it's, for a number of reasons, feels like a better choice. And I think that we just need to lean towards this idea of building self-efficacy across different modalities that will benefit the whole human experience, the whole, both physiologically broad human experience as well as psychological experience. There's just something, and I would really love, and maybe I can do this in my own studies, ongoing studies. I would love to meet with some professor who is interested in really studying the psychological benefits of weight training alone, like of lifting stuff and being in a gym and being in gym. And I know it's been done, but to the degree where I think really understanding self-efficacy, really understanding how there's a bit of a paradox going on whereby you can't, so I know that you sort of maybe wanted to touch on self-efficacy, but
sure.
Is that okay if I dive in? It's one of my most, I'm so excited.
Dive.
It's such an exciting concept. So self-efficacy is basically your, you could think of it as something similar to like self-belief, but it's basically your belief in your ability to engage with, or let's say even achieve a health behavior or a health outcome. So quitting smoking, let's take that as an example. If you just absolutely categorically do not think that you could embark on something like quitting smoking, you won't even try. It's that quote, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right? That is self-efficacy essentially. And so self-efficacy is one of the biggest predictors of whether we are or are not going to engage with a health behavior. That means if you have very low self-belief or self-efficacy in resistance training or weight training, you're not even going to start. But we know that if you don't start, you're never going to get the self-efficacy. So there's this period. So there's a paradox, right? Because it's like, if you need it to do the behavior, but you don't have it, then you're never going to do the behavior. And if you never do the behavior, you're never going to get the self-efficacy. So it's like, there's no way to build it. You have to break the cycle by just being bad at it. And this is where coaches and before and afters really come in. This is why they're so successful for people, for coaches in selling their programs, is because what you're doing is, yes, there's a level of relatability. Maybe you see that person, you think, oh, okay, he's not just a trainer. There's an everyday person doing this and achieving results. Okay, maybe I can do that too. So there's an identity piece, but there's also, you are borrowing the self-efficacy of the trainer. self-efficacy being you believe that they can get you where you need to be and they believe that they can get you there. So if I am your coach, Andrew, you're basically, maybe you don't have any belief in yourself, but if you believe that I can get you there, then there's a level of self-efficacy that you've kind of borrowed, right, in order to engage in the health behavior. So this is where PTs, coaches, everything, buying someone's program online, this is where it's really helpful. And it is not a small piece. People often think like, oh, cycle and heart's a bit of fluff. I'm like, no, this is very robust in the research that self-efficacy is so important. So don't be ashamed if you are like thinking, I don't know, it's a very old school thought, but a lot of people feel, like, oh no, I can do it myself. I can just do it. And it's like, no, actually getting a coach that's really helpful. Why do you think Olympic athletes have them as well? So anyway, the point is that self-efficacy is one of those things that we need in order to engage with something. However, if we don't have it, we need to either borrow it or we need to just kind of be bad at stuff for a period of time. We need to be okay with the uncertainty. We need to lean into that. Now, the reason I'm so passionate about it is that I think that has transference into other areas of life. Mm-hmm. And I've had this definitely anecdotally where I've had women, the women in doing the Vertue method who I have managed to convince, draw them over from yoga or draw them from Pilates, get them into weight training, get them more confident with weight training. And they are like, oh my goodness, I suddenly feel like I can ask for that pay rise. I suddenly feel like I can, whatever it might be, leave my partner, stay with my partner, travel the world, do these things. Because I think that when you get good at handling uncertainty, handling the difficulty in the weights room, similarly to how I was explaining, who you are on the yoga mats, who you are in life. I think in the weights room, there's an element of that, when you have a challenge with a weight, you can't move. And then suddenly over time, you see that you're suddenly adding weight to the bar and you go, shit, my body's doing it. It just, there's some magic going on. And I would really love to study that. I haven't seen anyone really, I don't know how you'd operationalize that study, but it would be fun.
A quick break from this episode to shout out RP Strength and the RP Hypertrophy app. I have a big confession. I've never used a coach before. I've always auto-regulated my training for decades. But I've known Dr. Mike Isertel and Nick Shaw, the founders of RP, for years. I'll get behind anything they create, including years of reading their books, consuming their media, attending their seminars, and having them as guests on the show. And I've been using the RP Hypertrophy app now for several months. And several things have happened. It forced me to make smaller and more gradual but better increases in weight volume across time, like putting 5-pound plates on each side of a leg press. Like, who does that? Never before. Only 45s. It cut out the jump volume. It made my workouts faster and more efficient. I show up with a plan. I didn't have to think about what to do. I feel more accountable having a log my progress. And I don't skip things because I don't feel like it. If hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to manage your gains and to take the guesswork out of your program. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free, and if you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. I've also got you a $50 US dollar discount, so go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. That's rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP. I think it's fundamentally so intuitive. Now, I'm going to use a couple of terms that, some people might not love, but I'll get there. I think I'll start here. You go to the gym, and I'm just paraphrasing what you said. You go to the gym, you stick with it, you get stronger, you build muscle. You've generated proof that your action creates result. And I think a lot of people, and this is one of the provocative terms, I don't think it is, just some people might react to it, is I think a lot of people live in a victim mindset. They want to believe, they've been reinforced that the world is bad, the world is out to get them. They have no sense of control. And here's a second term that sometimes gets co-opted is they have low agency. They have no agency over their own outcomes. But to start acting or behaving in such a way that might generate proof that their effort can change their circumstance, very threatening to someone's identity, because then it becomes, and yes, we know their playing field is not level. We know that there's a lot of things in the world that are genuinely, people have various disadvantages. There's things that more or less kind of work against people, but you generate proof that no, all along you actually had greater say in this than you thought you did. And that can be a difficult thing to confront, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point you make. I think there's something I just feel like I was very humbled by recently, which is the common sense model of illness representation. This is a psychological framework, sort of landed around the same time as the biopsychosocial approach kind of was pushed in. And for anyone that doesn't know, sort of like the background of that is that prior to the biopsychosocial approach, which is where you acknowledge that someone's health is not just about their biology, but it's also their psychology and their social circumstances impacting their health outcomes. Before that, they were very much in this medical model, which was like, it's biology or it's nothing. And so this common sense model really was basically saying that we are, as people, we are active participants in our health outcomes and our health interpretation. So for a long time, we've probably all sat in front of those doctors before where, we feel like they're either labeling us as a compliant patient or a non-compliant patient. And so you're either like following the rules that have been just kind of blurted at you or not. And the problem is that we are interpreting information about, let's say, a particular experience in our body at the same time as we are having an emotional response to those sensations and a intellectual one. So like, let's say you have back pain, for example. You're not just having like an intellectual response. You're not saying, oh, I've got back pain. Okay, Andrew told me that I need to activate my glutes. That's why I have this back pain. Okay, it's my glutes. You're going to have an emotional response. You might feel frustrated. You might feel deflated. You might feel scared. All of these things dictate they dictate pain perception, and they also dictate what behaviors you'll choose to take. And so when you bring up victim mentality, or even just like, a mentality that is like, things always go wrong for me, this model essentially is like, yeah, well, that will have an impact on your outcomes, and potentially it won't have a great one. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a similar sort of, I don't know if you've heard of like the expectation effect. There's lots of different ones. Placebo is
absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And so this is essentially also another version of that, whereby your perception of the sensation that you're experiencing is going to dictate a bunch of things, but it will dictate often your behaviors around health. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to what are the thoughts that you're having around these sensations. When someone does it, I mean, I don't know if you've ever, been around someone who's done a deadlift, and if they're new to deadlifting, they might say, feel it in my back. And if you've had a back injury before, back pain, you're kind of going, oh, no, I don't think that's right for me. So you stay off deadlifting. You avoid deadlifting because you're like, nah, I just feel them in my back. It's not good for me. But what we also know is that deadlifting can actually help with back pain. It can actually help with the cause of some of these issues. And so understanding ourselves a lot better will help us to, shift those behaviors a little bit more. So yeah, there's a lot going on. This is why I, went back to uni actually, because I became a yoga teacher and a PT first. And even though I wanted to be a psychologist from a very young age, for whatever reason, I was like getting into all kinds of different things in my life. And I thought, nah, I don't know if that's the right path. And it wasn't until, working for at least 10 years as a PT made me go, oh man, like I absolutely need to be in the psychology space, because the things I am seeing, people can have knowledge. They can have they can have a chef, they can have they can have the perfect dietitian writing out their food plan. They can have the best PT, best physio, best everything. And yet there's a reason why they just can't quite engage with that behavior. And psychology often has the answer to that. Systems, understanding behavioral systems, behavioral science, it all can help to just fit that piece so that you can see the full puzzle picture, if that makes sense.
Are you familiar with Dr. Katie Dabrowski?
No.
You would love her. So she's been a guest. So anybody who's interested in what you were just talking about, she's a doctor of physical therapy. We talked about a lot of the things you talked about, but she has a background in psychology. So
Beautiful.
There's like very extensive formal education there. So I think you would actually really love her. And there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the same things that, say, a Dr. Alyssa Olenek would also know and understand. It's a Alyssa's a PhD. I mean, if I believe of exercise physiology, exercise science is her PhD, technically.
Yep.
And then Katie is a doctor of physical therapy, but I mean, she's a strength coach as well. I just think that you would absolutely love her and
Sounds
her
like
media.
it.
Because there's just so much overlap there.
I'll have a good binge there.
Good. And that's for everybody listening as well. This has been amazing. I appreciate the time we've had to talk. Everybody can get you on Instagram at Shona, SHONA _Vertue, VERTUE. Okay.
That's
so
right.
It's E, not an I. Is there anywhere else you want to send people? You've got a podcast.
I have a podcast as well, just called the Vertue Podcast, again, VERTUE. And if you're struggling with just kind of like adherence to exercise, if you're sort of, if you're having trouble, like maybe you're going through a season of life where things are just really crazy. I also created a YouTube channel called The Daily 10. And it's basically just 10 minutes of movement that's a bit more structured. It's sort of not just like random workouts here and there, which you often find on YouTube, but I program them. So there's like programs that you can do where you're still sort of following some level of periodization, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. So check that out.
Thank you. This has been a treat. I appreciate you. Everybody listening, please go follow Shona. Dive into her resources, okay? Thank you, Shona.
Thank you. Thank you.